Hello everyone and welcome to Learn TV. We are a channel dedicated to the latest trends in the learning and development industry. My name is Philip and I'll be your host for today's episode. A successful leader needs to be both a good manager and good communicator in order to get the team on board towards company's vision of success. How can a manager transform into a leader, and what is the process behind a successful transition? Answers to these questions we will request from our newest guest, Daniel Feiman, an expert trainer and consultant for strategy, finance, succession, and leadership. Daniel, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on our show today.
And thank you very much for having me.
Warren Benise, author of Learning to Lead, a workbook on becoming a leader, once said that leaders are people who do the right thing, managers are people who do things right. Let's start with drawing a clear distinction between a manager and a leader. What are the differences?
And this is very important because every organization needs both managers and leaders, but we do have to really separate them. So there are a number of categories or ways we could differentiate them, and I'll narrow it down to 5. Let's talk about focus. A manager focuses on managing work, getting it done, where a leader focuses on leading people. Let's talk about the time horizon. Managers have a very short-term time horizon. They're trying to meet today's goals, where a leader really focuses on the long term, the strategic horizon. A manager seeks to meet objectives, where a leader seeks to achieve the vision of the organization or their own vision. When it comes to power within the organization, a manager generally will use their formal authority as their power base, where a leader will use personal charisma. And finally, when it comes to their style, a manager uses a transactional style. I need to get this done and this done and this done, where a leader uses a transformational style to get us from here to there.
What about the similarities? What are the key skills, qualities, and attributes of both leadership and management?
Very important question. Both leaders and managers, in spite of the differences we've talked about, must share some similarities. And there's, again, a number of these, but we'll start with a couple of the most important. They must focus on open communication. And this is both listening and speaking. So the listening has to be active, which is a skill many people don't have. Both managers and leaders truly need to be honest with everyone and respect each other as well as all their direct reports. They have to hold themselves accountable just as they're holding all of their direct reports accountable in the same way. They're both in charge of groups of people. They both help their organizations reach goals. They provide structure, whether they're in a leadership role or a management role. They need to be confident in their abilities, and they need to be committed to their roles. Both leaders and managers definitely need to be optimistic, and they need to be able to make solid, sound decisions. They're both looking for the same end result, but just in very different ways.
The role of leaders and managers has drastically changed in the past decade. What are the skills required for contemporary management?
Peter Drucker, in his book, Management Challenges for the 21st Century, which, believe it or not, he wrote 20 years ago, talked about the relationship between employers and employees, between managers and leaders on the one side and all of the people in the company, was going to change significantly, primarily because we're gradually moving from a skill set where people are using their hands to using their brains more. And so they're more transmittable. So contemporary management really involves planning, leading, organizing, and controlling operations to meet the objectives, to meet the goals of the organizations, much more so than even in the past. Managers at every level really are responsible for using resources effectively. And there's a huge difference between effectiveness and efficiency. But we're looking at limited resources in virtually every organization. So how can we build leaders and managers' skill sets so they can make the best or optimal decisions, so they can monitor information as it's available? They're supervising people at a very different level than in the past. And they have challenges that maybe we really didn't have before. The workforces are much more diverse than ever in the past. We have to maintain a competitive edge because there's always competition that's always trying to take over for us. We have to do this while behaving both ethically and using technologies as they're emerging.
And can you tell us a bit more about the role of a modern leader?
Modern leaders need to be much better communicators than they've ever had to be before. As I mentioned earlier, active listening, which is a skill that can be learned but is not normal for most of us, is very critical to the successful leader. They also need to be strategic thinkers, long-term, big picture. They need to be able to turn information into action. And something that isn't spoken about very frequently is possessing emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is being able to relate to people at different levels with different skill sets and different challenges. They need to be resilient. They have to be able to bounce back from challenges and problems. And they need to be agile to move when necessary. They must, for the organization, create a long-term vision and be very clear on the purpose of the organization. And finally, great modern leaders have to use both innovation and creativity to move us from where we are to where they'd like us to be.
What are all the leadership styles out there?
The question of leadership styles is an interesting one because there's not universal agreement as to whether there are 3 or 6 or 10 different styles. There are subsections. We like to look at what is considered generally the 6 most clear differences in leadership styles. Number 1 is visionary or authoritative. This is the leader that inspires their people, inspires their direct reports. And by the way, no one style is going to always work. This is why we talk about situational leadership. A good leader is going to use their visionary leadership styles when it's appropriate, but when the other forms are necessary, they can switch. So let's talk about the second one, which is coaching. A coaching leadership style connects individual goals, personal goals of the people within the organization to the organization's goals. So it's a style of making sure people understand how they relate. Then there's the affiliative. The affiliative is also referred to as the team builder. They promote harmony within the team. There's, of course, the democratic leadership style, and this focuses on collaboration. How can we get the job done? Then there's the pace-setting leader. The pace-setting leader focuses on performance and meeting goals. This is the closest link between a management role and a leadership role. Remember, managers are focused on the immediate and meeting short-term goals. So there are times that a leader is going to have to step into that role and use their pace-setting skills. And then finally, the commanding style. The commanding style is that autocratic leader that doesn't work in the long run, but if the building's on fire and they say, get out, that's when that style is appropriate.
How can leaders gain and use workplace skills to manage people more effectively?
In today's world, leaders need to be able to know what the right sources of data are and have instant access to as much data as possible. They need to be insightful. We talked earlier about being innovative and creative. So they have to be able to look beyond the data. They have to be able to see into the future. Not that they can control it, but they can say, with the information we have, where do we think we're going? They have to be able to communicate throughout the organization and certainly to their direct reports and the managers where we're going and how we're going to get there. They also need to support this or augment this by leveraging their human capital, as it's called. And human capital, of course, is our workforce. They are, without a doubt, the most valuable part of any organization. And many companies say this, but they don't necessarily take the opportunity to appreciate the value that all their staff brings. So how can we develop our staff, both individually and collectively, so together we can all do more? Goes back to something that was written about 70 years ago in Think and Grow Rich. We are all smarter than any one of us is smart. Well, the same thing in an organization. The more we develop our people, the more they can accomplish together. And 1 + 1 can equal 3, but of course, don't tell that to your accountant. Then we have to gather the voice of the workforce. How are we working together? How can we make better decisions moving forward than in the past? How are we going to overcome some of the challenges and problems that are going to occur? And sometimes that's just retaining good people. So we have to be aware of these possibilities and try to be proactive.
What kind of role does motivation play here?
In every organization, a challenge for leaders at any level, whether we call them leaders or managers or supervisors, our role, our responsibility, of course, is to achieve objectives, both short-term and long-term. And a key motivation, a key skill set, I should say, is the ability to motivate or encourage all of our employees to work towards a common goal, as well as their personal goals. Without motivation, we will not accomplish the objectives that we have. And it's really creating a way of thinking, feeling, and behaving within the organization.
How can managers apply it to themselves as well as individuals and teams?
When it comes to motivation, it's important for leaders and managers to start with what motivates them, what motivates me as an individual, and then get to know their direct reports. Not everyone is motivated by the same things. Sometimes it's opportunity, sometimes it's challenge, sometimes it's title. What motivates people? What encourages people to go beyond where they are? Once we understand their individual motivations, then we need to provide them both the objectives to achieve and the resources to do so. And I've seen many organizations that provide one or the other, but not necessarily both. We need to catch our employees doing something right. They're so used to being caught doing something wrong and criticized. We need to find opportunities to catch them doing something right so we can compliment them. And make sure they understand the purpose, the vision, the mission of the organization. Those all should be motivators on an ongoing basis.
Training Magazine recently listed another new challenge for today's leaders: managing teams and customers from multiple generations and different backgrounds. What is your advice to managers and leaders when it comes to building enduring relationships across all groups?
In today's diverse workforce, and from what I've seen and talking to my colleagues and organizations that I've worked with, diversity in the workforce is more so today than ever before. And this is a good thing. We have to understand that people from different backgrounds with different skill sets of different generations all bring different pluses to an organization or a situation. So we have to start off by trusting our employees, and we have to respect them for their differences as well as their similarities. We need to make sure that we encourage inclusion. Everyone is part of the team. We welcome diverse opinions, not arguments, but diverse opinions, because that's how we get to real solutions. We must have open communication, and we mentioned this previously. And communication is a skill set that we all presume we have, But the vast majority of people, including leaders and managers, have never been trained in communication. So clear, effective speaking and active listening should be taught so that everyone up and down the organization can communicate better for more positive results. Managers and leaders need to develop their own interpersonal skills, their emotional intelligence, their ability to react with, and set examples for all of their direct reports within the organization. They need to be clear and consistent in their communication. In today's world with diversified workforces, these are the keys to much better results for the organization and a much happier workforce, as well as leaders and managers.
How can employers, or learning and development managers for that matter, develop great leaders at scale?
Developing anything at scale is a challenge without a proper process. So what we need to do is go into an organization and assess their management and leadership development programs. Do they have a formal program to take a worker and develop them into a management role? Do they have a process to develop managers into leaders and to improve their leaders? If they don't have a process, then they really need to develop a formal, documented, regularly evaluated process so they have some consistency. That's the biggest challenge, the biggest key to developing leaders at scale. There needs to be a support system. There needs to be a performance measurement system and an evaluation system. So every manager and leader today and into the future can understand where they're operating appropriately and where they need to improve. If we can establish this type of consistent, objective system, process within an organization, that organization can develop leaders at scale as they grow, not any faster because they wouldn't be needed, and not any slower because then no one is leading the organization. So those have to be paced together. And developing real teams, collaborative, interactive teams, is critical to this.
How can they determine where future personal development may improve their future roles and aspirations?
In order to do this appropriately, in order to help all leaders and managers fill their current roles as well as their aspirations, we need a clear vision in the organization. That's the perfect horizon the organization is moving towards. What is the mission? What is the business that they are in and for whom? This needs to be documented, and everyone needs to understand this within the organization. So if they have a clear vision, where they're going, a clear mission, who they're doing this for and how, and core values that are actually lived by the organization, they have the best opportunity to develop their people and for every individual in the organization to have the opportunity to reach their individual as well as their collective goals.
Daniel, thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
And thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this.
Big thanks to our viewers for staying with us. You can watch our live stream every day on LinkedIn or watch the recordings on our YouTube and Vimeo channel. If there's a topic you would like us to cover, drop us a message and we will review it with our team of experts. Until next time, stay tuned.